to the land we sit on. Eventually, we will need to move beyond these words to concrete action. For now, we offer these words. We acknowledge the land and the peoples who belong to this land, the Muwekma Ohlone people. Our church, our institutions, and our homes occupy their land. From the Ohlone people, who have had an ancestral relationship with the plants, the animals, and the water of this land for millennia. That relationship continues to the present day. The Ohlone people are still here. In solidarity with all Indigenous people and their right to self-determination and justice, we commit to working toward accountability of the theft, dispossession, and resulting trauma that Native peoples continue to face. We commit to being active partners toward the healing of this intergenerational trauma.
Good morning and welcome to church. My name is Barbara North and I serve on your board of trustees. And I'm here this morning to share some announcements. You've been hearing about it and it's coming next weekend. Paula Cole-Jones and friends will soon be leading a powerful anti-racism training. Jubilee 3 focuses on learning together about systemic racism. This updated curriculum is now available to us on September 9th through 11th, Friday evening, all day Saturday, and Sunday afternoon. This new material will cover intersectionality and steps to respond to systemic racism. Some scholarships are still available through the Journey Towards Wholeness transformation team. A limited number of spaces are also available for those who'd like to attend in person in Wente Hall. Consistent with church COVID policy, all in-person attendees must be masked, vaccinated, and boosted. If you would like one of these seats, please reach out to Janet McFarland. She can let you know when to arrive, how food will be arranged, and all of the other logistics. Want to learn more about another step away from fossil fuels towards greening our lives? Using heat pumps instead of gas furnaces means much less pollution of our homes and in the environment. This Wednesday, September 7th, from 7 to 8 p.m., the heat pump company Electrify My Home is doing a virtual presentation for our congregation. Contact Heather McLeod at earthjustice@uuoakland.org for more information. This month, the Poetry Circle has moved from its usual first Sunday monthly to next Sunday, September 11th. Join fellow poetry lovers to read aloud and enjoy poems. Bring one you've written or any favorite, or just come to listen. Contact Ron Weisberg at poetry@uuoakland.org for more information. Thank you.
This morning, we light our candles and our chalice. We light our peace candle first. This message is from Sherilyn Ifill, an African-American activist. Remember that we have never seen the America we've been fighting for, so no need to be nostalgic. Right on the other side of this unraveling is opportunity. If we keep fighting, no matter what, take care of ourselves and each other, stay strategic and principled, and use all of our power. Now we light our Black Lives Matter candle. We light this candle today to honor the humanity and the dignity of Donovan Lewis, a Black man shot by Columbus, Ohio police while asleep in bed. Together, we say, Black Lives Matter. And now we light our chalice. We light this chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism. May it remind us of the divine spark in all of creation, the power of love to heal what is broken, and to be grateful for life's blessings each day. This opportunity to build the next world, the beloved community we dream about, is just on the other side of the challenges we currently face, both as individuals and as a community. Today, we turn our attention to courage and mutual care for the journey ahead of us. In one voice, let the people say, "Come, let us worship together."
All right. This morning, I'm so excited to introduce to you Josh Rose, who comes to us with Unitarian experiences in other places, to bring us a reading about Theodore Parker and his courage. Theodore Parker was one of the people who fought for the Unitarian Universalist theology that we experience today, that encourages us to keep using our reason and conscience in community together. Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you. An excerpt from Theodore Parker, Outcast Hero, by Reverend Helen Luton Cohen. Learning was not just for learning's sake. Theodore Parker, the Unitarian leader and luminary, gave of himself, of what he knew and thought, unstintingly, to preaching, to reforming, to ministering, to politicking, to helping the poor and oppressed, to socializing with a wide range of friends, to letter writing to correspondents all over the country, to a loving relationship with his wife, Lydia Cabot. Despite these many directions in his life, Theodore Parker had two major roles that have made their mark in history, in addition to having been one of the greatest and most popular orators of his time, a time when oratory was one of the great entertainments for all groups of people. His 28th Congregational Society in Boston numbered 7,000 members, with perhaps 2,000 attending every Sunday. His first major role was as a spokesman for Transcendentalism, the worldview of the many second-generation Unitarians rejected by the first generation, who had themselves been so recently rejected by the Orthodox Calvinists. Transcendentalism was a view that focused on inner truth in religion, on the voice of conscience and reason, on the universality of these truths through time and culture, and de-emphasized the stories of the Bible, the miracles of Jesus, the institutional structures of the church. Parker's uncompromising statement of these principles in his 1841 sermon, The Transient and Permanent in Christianity, well, it cut him off from the conservative Unitarians who still found the authority of Scripture and the evidence of miracles central to religion, gave clear expression and leadership to cultural change, to the broadening of American culture to include Eastern ideas, the learnings of science, freedom of the individual mind from tyranny and dogmatism, even liberal dogmatism. His second major role was as social reformer, and particularly as abolitionist. Though not the first Unitarian minister to take up the cause of the enslaved, he gave it its most powerful voice, a voice increasingly impatient and then outraged at the hypocrisy of the North, so that in his speech after the death of Daniel Webster, whose admirable qualities Parker eulogized before he went on to denounce their corruption as exemplified in Webster's support for the fugitive slave law, he spoke of the pernicious influence of slavery in this way. Slavery, the most hideous snake which southern regions breed, with 15 unequal feet, came crawling north, fold on fold, and ring on ring, and coil on coil, the venomed monster came. Then avarice, the foulest worm which northern cities gender in their heat, went crawling south, with many a wriggling curl. It wound along its way. At length they met, and twisting up in their obscene embrace, the twain became one monster, they were one poison. Northward and southward wormed the thing along its track, leaving the stain of its breath in the people's face, and its hissing against the Lord rings yet in many a speech. Then what a shrinking there was of great consciences and hearts and minds. But Parker not only spoke about slavery, he helped the fugitive slave Ellen Craft escape her pursuers by riding with her through the dark of night. He was down at the wharf lamenting when Thomas Sims was carried back to Savannah to be publicly whipped on the 19th of April. He was part of the aborted plot to rescue Anthony Burns and was later brought to trial for obstructing justice, though the case was dismissed. He became an advisor to politicians like Charles Sumner, writing constantly to keep him on the straight and narrow road to abolition. Parker became a hero to thousands, though he was never reconciled with the conservative Unitarians of Boston, who found both his religion and his politics tasteless, offensive, and frightening. The alumni of the Harvard Divinity School refused to send him a letter of sympathy in 1859 and 1860, when he lay dying of consumption in Florence, Italy, at the age of 50. Since then, Parker's religious and social ideas have been absorbed by our movement, and he is one of our heroes.
Thank you so much. Now's the time in our service when we get to say hello to one another. Please check in before you hug folks. Elbow bumps, fist bumps, saying hello. Please go ahead. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Penny. Good morning. I love it. I welcome you back to your seats. Thank you so much for your hospitality this morning. I invite you to continue to check in with folks after the service. Thank you and welcome. I'm so grateful to introduce to you this morning Janet McFarland, who's going to continue on the theme of courage with a story about Olympia Brown, who was the first woman ordained into Universalist ministry. Thank you, Janet.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, all of you on Zoom who I cannot see. Olympia Brown. When Olympia Brown was little, she was told a lot of things that girls weren't supposed to do, such as girls weren't supposed to whistle, girls weren't supposed to climb trees, or run fast, or catch frogs. But Olympia did. She did all those things, and more. You can do whatever a boy can do, her mother and her father told her, and Olympia knew it was true. She climbed trees and ran fast and caught frogs, and when she was in school, she answered the teacher's questions loud and clear. Little girls ought to be quiet, said one lady in town. Little girls ought not to make themselves heard. But Olympia did. She had a voice, and she was going to use it every day. When Olympia Brown was a teenager, young women weren't supposed to go to college. Young women weren't supposed to leave home to go off and learn complicated things, but Olympia did. She did all those things and more. Olympia left home and went to Antioch College. She went to class and studied and learned all kinds of complicated things. Young women ought not to be in college, said one professor at that school, but since they are here, they must read their reports. Young women ought not to give speeches from memory like the men. But Olympia did. When it was her turn to present her report, she rolled up the papers in her hand and said each and every word loud and clear. Olympia Brown had a voice, and she was going to use it every day. When Olympia Brown was in college, women weren't supposed to wear pants. Women weren't supposed to wear anything except very long dresses that came all the way down to their toes. But Olympia did. She wore dresses that came down only past her knees, and under them, she dared to wear pants. Bloomers, the pants were called, after Amelia Bloomer, the woman who had created them a few years before. Women ought not to show their ankles in public, exclaimed some of the men, and women certainly ought not to wear pants. But Olympia did. She wore her bloomers every day, no matter how much the men sneered. When Olympia was finished with college, women weren't supposed to be ministers. Women never stood up in front of a congregation and talked about God. But Olympia did. She did all those things and more. Olympia graduated from the Theological School of St. Lawrence University in 1863, and she was ordained as a Universalist minister in June of that year, the second woman ever to be officially ordained by that church. She became the Reverend Olympia Brown. "Women ought not to speak in public," said a minister at that time. "Women ought not to take the pulpit, or discuss the nature of God." But the Reverend Olympia Brown did. During the next 35 years, she was a minister in 5 different congregations, and she visited other congregations too. She took the pulpit in every single one, and she spoke on the nature of God and love, and she did an excellent job. Olympia Brown had a voice, and she used it every day. When Olympia Brown was born, women were not allowed to vote. Women weren't allowed to have any say in who was elected president or senator or mayor of the town. But Olympia had something to say about that. Olympia had a lot to say about that. She traveled all over the state of Kansas in a horse and buggy, giving speeches to convince people that women deserved the right to vote. She wrote hundreds of letters. She spoke to the representatives and senators in Congress. She marched in parades. Olympia and her friends worked hard to get women the right to vote. Olympia Brown had a voice, and she used it every day for over 50 years. And finally, when Olympia Brown was old, women were allowed to vote. In November of 1920, when Olympia was 85 years old, she voted for the very first time. Olympia had always had a voice, and she used it to make sure that she and all the other women in the United States had a vote as well.
Thank you so much, Janet. Now we welcome Donna Fujioka to share a reflection with us. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you. What is courage? Where do I go to look things up? The internet, of course. One place said that courage is the choice and willingness to confront agony, pain, danger, uncertainty, or intimidation. I like that particular definition because it focuses on the internal dimension of courage, choice and willingness. This is in contrast to tales in the media of feats of courage, especially when the so-called hero demurs and said, "I didn't have time to think. I just did it. It must have been instinct." Is that courage? And is there an objective dimension to courage? I suppose at one end are acts, mostly public, that universally would be regarded as courageous. But that's not what I plan to talk about today. Not heroics with a big H, or bravery with a big B, and not courage with a big C. I will be focusing on the subjective aspect of courage. By subjective courage, I mean that what qualifies as personally courageous will be different for each of us. We each have different challenges, so what causes nearly paralyzing fear or anxiety for one person may not even be noticed by another. For example, I am thinking of at least one member of this congregation who struggles with depression. To me, I think that person shows a lot of courage, and I celebrate each time they sign onto Zoom for a service and turn on their camera instead of staying in bed. It can't be easy. Another congregant disclosed to me that their ancestry included slave owners. That couldn't have been easy, especially in California, where we don't have a lot of folks with roots in the South who might share that background. I will also note that they are doing their darndest to become anti-racist. I find courage in the cracks and crevices because the choice and willingness to confront agony, pain, danger, uncertainty, or intimidation can be found in so many places every single day. Confronting uncertainty is a big one. How about for you? To me, that includes talking to strangers because I was admonished my entire childhood not to talk to strangers because I guess they could be dangerous. So that is the subconscious tape that plays through my head. It also, by the way, includes talking in front of a group. Sex, money, race. 3 things it takes courage to talk about. Well, our congregational sex therapist, Joni Blank, has passed away, and as an Asian, I am extra averse to talking about sex. And I'll leave the money talk to the stewardship team. But race? I will admit I'm on the Journey Toward Wholeness transformation team to help the church become anti-racist and anti-oppressive. And through all my years on JTW, and in my life actually, it has become easier to talk about race, which seems to be a big no-no in America. Truly, race talk becomes easier with practice. And yes, the path to anti-racism and anti-oppression is littered with missteps and mistakes. I'll admit to frustration and annoyance, not to mention embarrassment. But I haven't died, nor have I killed anyone due to those mistakes. That is why I am so excited to be taking Paula Cole-Jones' new Jubilee 3 class next weekend. Among other things, Jubilee 3 will address intersectionality, where racism intersects with other oppressions such as disability and LGBTQIA, and it will give me the opportunity to confront my ignorance and blind spots and learn how to avoid harming others. This congregation voted to adopt the 8th principle. I hope your courageous path includes signing up for the Jubilee 3 class and confronting whatever pain, uncertainty, or intimidation you fear so that we can together dismantle racism and other oppressions within ourselves and in our institutions. Thank you. And now, let's join in singing Hold On. If you're on Zoom, please do stay muted. You'll see the lyrics on the screen to sing along.
Thank you. Please do have a seat. This is the part of our service when we share with each other what's on our hearts. If you're on Zoom, you might be typing that into the chat. In this room, you can speak a word or two. And if you're on Twitch and you'd like us to know what's on your heart, please feel free to email. That's Rev Soto, REVSOTO, @uuoakland.org. And I'll be happy to bring it. So please go ahead and speak a word or two into the space. Thank you. Thank you, and we will give a congregational blessing. We'll say together, we hold them in our care. Let's do that now. We hold them in our care. And will you join me in a moment of prayer or meditation? We are charged to live within care, to offer people reflection of their own worth, to study and think, to talk gently and act frankly, to listen to stars and birds, to babies and sages with open hearts, to bear things with cheer and bravery when we may, to offer comfort and receive it when we must, to hurry never. And in a word, to let unbidden and unconscious grow up through the common. This is the symphony of our lives. We carry grief, we carry joy, we may bring them in a word, we may bring them in silence. But you, today, are wrapped in blessing and care for all the ways that you are, all the ways that you are not. And in your entire humanity, you are welcome, you are beloved, and you are whole. For all these things, we give thanks and say, Amen. We begin today with words from Joseph Campbell about the hero path. We have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero path, and where we had thought to find an abomination, we shall find a god. Where we had thought to travel outward, we shall come to the center of our own existence. Where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world. This word is an invitation to courage. And who is doing the inviting? Joseph Campbell was a white man born in New York City who dedicated his life and career to understanding mythology and using it as a tool for our understanding people and the world around them. One of our undertakings in this year of congregational life is to embrace the complexity of both people and ideas all around us. Complexity. You've noticed it, right? Some of what we might encounter in Joseph Campbell's teachings would require our further engagement, careful nuance, intentional consideration of what is the same and what is different in people's experiences. This is true of many teachers, of us, and we must pay attention. Today, we pay attention to courage. Courage is something that we need a little bit of each day, and some days we need a lot. Next week, we will participate together in water communion or water ceremony, which is one of the rituals that we use to kick off the year of congregational life. Let me share a little bit about that ritual with you. In 1980, two Unitarian Universalist women, Carolyn McDade and Lucille Shuck Longview, were asked to create a worship service for the Women in Religion Continental Convocation of Unitarian Universalists. This is a long name. It meant Unitarian Universalist women from all over were going to get together and worship and connect. This is what they said. Water is more than simply a metaphor. It is elemental and primary, calling forward feelings of awe and reverence. Acknowledging that the ocean is considered by many to be the place from which all life on our planet came, it is the womb of life. And that amniotic waters surround each of us prenatally. We're connected by that. We now realize that this worship service was for us a new story of creation. We choose water as our symbol of empowerment. What is that power for? In the past few services, we've been exploring the practices of this congregation that express key values and embody core practices: joy, pastoral care, worship, courage, ritual. These are some of the things that really matter and become part of the living, breathing Unitarian Universalism that we experience together. As pandemic conditions keep changing, replanting and reconnecting matters deeply. It brings us to one of our big questions. Let's go to our next slide. Well, a couple more, I think. There's the list of things, stuff we've been working on, stuff we've been focusing on, and one more for a question. What is the power of community for? So let's think about that. It's non-negotiable that moving forward together, looking out for each other, is a core value of this community. It is also a matter of spiritual and ethical maturity that calls for serious consideration. To connect past, present, and future, I want to invite us to contemplate the values, experiences, and life of Reverend Olympia Brown, who was the first woman to be ordained as a Universalist minister. But in order to do that, we have questions to ask ourselves. Mission. One of the quickest ways to embody our mission is to say, what's our business? This Sunday morning is part of our business. How we imagine the coming weeks together is part of our business. And how we grow together as a community, that's our business. Where do we mean to go? Well, we know a lot of things about Olympia Brown. She had places she had to go, like school. She went to Mount Holyoke for a year, and she said, this place is too conservative. So she went to Antioch College. And she wasn't exactly welcome there, which is something I really want you to take away this morning. Sometimes the difficulty, the challenge, is like going uphill. No one's like, hey, let me make this easy and soft for you. Let me make your freedom easy to purchase. Let me make your liberation self-checkout. It's not like that. So I need you to know that when it seems hard, you are not wrong. And when you are afraid, that's good information. So, she moved to Antioch College. She was the first of 4 children, got a great education. Her parents said, this is going really well. Let's move everyone to Antioch. So all of our children can get a good education. Have you heard that part before? Have you heard about her family moving to Antioch? Here's what I need you to know about that. It means that when we talk about someone who endured a lot to get where she was, to make sure that women eventually could vote, she had more support than the average student, more support than the average woman. And this would end up mattering a lot. So you can hear someone tell the story of Olympia Brown without acknowledging that she didn't have to pull herself up by her bootstraps. Her whole family came to college. And that's not a bad thing, it's not a wrong thing, it's a beautiful, important thing. But when you leave it out, then we leave out part of the wisdom. Does that make sense? So, that's where she meant to go, and that is where she ended up. Our vision in the congregation is to build a radically inclusive community. Are people around you saying, hey, that's great. We've been looking for one of those. Only some people, right? Again, when you create something out of not that many resources, sometimes it's harder than it looks. But that doesn't mean you haven't been doing it, and it doesn't mean you haven't been dedicating yourself to that work. Let's look at our vision slide. It might take a minute. I'm going to go ahead and keep talking about it. What does it mean to be radically inclusive? You know, as many people are as in this room today is how many answers we could have on that subject. But what you know, at minimum, is that radical means more. Radical means unusual. Radical means with effort, creating something that hasn't been created before. A radically inclusive community. More, most, biggest, most intentional. That's part of what you imagine. To grow by expanding the welcome table. We're going to need to talk about that. What do we even mean by welcome table? There's no table in this room. We're not talking about a wooden table with 4 legs, unless we say we are. But part of what we mean is, who can come? And you know the Southern version, right? It's, y'all come. You do that with me. Y'all come. Y'all come. Everybody. And y'all means all. It really does. Now, I know you don't think of me as Southern, but given that I lived in Virginia from 11 to 18, I know a bit about it. And when it's 2 in the morning, you can know that I know a little bit about it. My tired accent is Southern. So, it's okay if I remind you that all means y'all, and what we're going for is a y'all come. So then, the last part of our vision, deepening our commitments to countering oppression. I'm gonna break that down just a bit for your encouragement. It's saying yes to you, yes to where you are, and yes to where you can go. If you can squeeze in that Jubilee 3 training, it's gonna show you the way to deepen, the way to build that muscle. If you can't, there will be more opportunities. But here's an important thing. Sometimes people say, well, Reverend Soto, you know, that's fine if you want to be anti-racist, but what are we for? You know what? You know the answer. It's y'all come. That's what it's for. And the thing is that our habits and our customs sometimes obscure the way that we don't act into that y'all come.